Eliza Harper's fingers trembled as she smoothed the pale blue dress her mother had stitched for her wedding. She had never imagined this day, not in her wildest nightmares, would come. The small frontier cabin felt stifling, as if the walls themselves were pressing in, echoing the dread in her chest. Her father's words still rang in her ears, harsh and unyielding. "This is the only way, Eliza. The Apache will protect our homestead, and you will secure our family's future." But Eliza could not see the future. All she could see was the dark uncertainty of the man she was about to marry, a warrior whose name she had only whispered to herself, as though speaking it aloud would summon some terrible fate. Tianita. The wedding had been simple, a quiet ceremony in the clearing outside the Harper homestead. A few settlers attended, along with a handful of Apache elders who had agreed to the union. There were no flowers, no music, only the solemn exchange of words that felt foreign and uncomfortable on her tongue. The vows were spoken quickly, more out of necessity than desire. Her heart had refused to join in the celebration. Now in the small room above the cabin, Eliza's mind raced. She could hear the low murmur of voices outside, Tianita talking softly to an elder, perhaps giving instructions, or perhaps reciting some prayer in his own tongue. She didn't know. She didn't understand him. And worse, she feared the night ahead. Her body, already stiff with terror, shivered at the thought of sharing a bed with a man she did not love. Her mind conjured stories she had heard in whispers. Women forced into marriages with Apache warriors, women who disappeared into the desert, never to return. She wanted to flee, to hide under the heavy quilts, but she knew the door was locked. Her father had ensured that. A knock at the door startled her, and a deep, calm voice followed. "Eliza?" Tianita's English was halting, measured, but it carried no malice. Only curiosity. She swallowed, trying to summon courage that felt as though it had deserted her long ago. "Yes," she whispered. The door opened slowly, revealing him. Not the fierce warrior of stories, but a man tall and strong, his face shadowed, eyes dark and unreadable. He carried no weapon, made no threatening gestures. He simply stood there waiting. "May I sit?" he asked, nodding toward a chair by the small fireplace. Eliza nodded, uncertain. The space between them felt charged, a fragile tension that could shatter with a single wrong movement. Tianita lowered himself onto the chair with the ease of a man entirely at home in the world, his gaze steady on hers. "I will not force you," he said quietly. I want you to be safe." The words, so simple, carried a weight she had not expected. A tiny spark of relief flickered in her chest. Perhaps he was not the monster she had feared. Perhaps he too carried the burdens of expectation and history. She swallowed, trying to steady her voice. "And I do not know you. I do not know if I can live like this with you." Tianita leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, fingers laced. "Then we will learn. Together, slowly. I will not hurt you." For a moment the fear did not dissipate, but it shifted. A small, fragile hope took root. A hope that maybe, despite the forced union, she could survive this night, perhaps even find something resembling peace. Eliza Harper, trembling yet strangely resolute, realized that the life before her was unknown, terrifying, and yet, just possibly, more alive than she had ever imagined. And in the quiet space of that dimly lit room, two strangers began the tentative first steps toward something far greater than duty. The fire in the hearth had burned low, leaving the small room bathed in shadows. Eliza Harper sat rigidly on the edge of the narrow bed, the rough quilt beneath her doing little to ease her tension. Her fingers were clenched in her lap, knuckles white as if holding on could somehow anchor her racing heart. Each creak of the wooden floor made her flinch, and every step outside the door seemed amplified in the silence. Tianita entered quietly, his presence filling the room without breaking it. There was no grand gesture, no ceremony, no expectation. He simply stepped in and sat across from her, eyes steady, observing, understanding more than she thought possible. The quiet between them was dense, heavy with unspoken fears and mutual uncertainty. Eliza wanted to run, to vanish into the night, but she could not. She had nowhere to go. Her life had been dictated by duty and fear for so long that even this small rebellion, wanting to flee, felt futile. And yet part of her longed for something else, something unnameable, A glimpse of kindness in the dark. I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. The words hung in the room, fragile as the flickering firelight. I'm afraid. Tianita's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. Then we will not rush, he said softly. You will not be forced. I will not harm you. Eliza's breath caught. She had expected harshness, a demand for obedience, a cruelty that would leave her broken. But this gentle patience was unfamiliar, almost terrifying in its sincerity. She didn't know how to respond. Her body ached with tension, and yet the fear began to mingle with something else. Curiosity. He rose slowly and moved closer, careful, measured. Eliza's instinct screamed at her to recoil, yet she remained frozen, torn between terror and the strange calm that emanated from him. Tianita stopped just short of her, his eyes never leaving hers. May I? He asked, gesturing toward the quilt. Eliza nodded, her throat dry, words failing her. He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, yet far enough to give her space. His hands, strong and calloused, rested gently on his knees. He did not reach for her, did not demand anything. He simply waited, offering a silent reassurance that she had not known in her entire life. Minutes stretched like hours. Eliza's heart pounded, yet a part of her began to relax. The fear, though still present, was tempered by his patience, by the quiet knowledge that she would not be hurt. She could feel the tension in her body slowly loosening, as though she were shedding years of terror in tiny increments. You are safe, Tianita whispered, leaning slightly closer. No one will force you. Not tonight, not ever. Eliza swallowed hard, tears prickling her eyes. The words were simple, but they carried a weight she had never experienced. She realized that this man, this stranger thrust into her life, did not see her as a possession or a duty. He saw her as something fragile and valuable, and for the first time she felt a flicker of trust. Tentatively she reached out, placing her hand atop his. His hand covered hers, firm yet gentle, holding her without pressure. It was a simple gesture, but to Eliza it was a lifeline, a promise that this night would not be a nightmare, that she could exist beside him without fear. For the first time since the wedding, she allowed herself to breathe fully, feeling the weight of fear lighten, replaced by a cautious hope. The night was still dark, the future uncertain, but in that quiet room by the fading firelight, Eliza Harper began to see the possibility of something more than duty. Something tender, something real, and as she sat there, hand in hand with the Apache warrior, she realized that perhaps the first step toward love was not in passion or grand declarations. It was in patience, understanding, and the quiet promise that she would never be alone. Days had passed since the wedding night, yet the weight of uncertainty clung to Eliza like a shadow. The cabin had settled into an uneasy rhythm. Quiet mornings, hushed conversations, and long stretches of silence where she felt both observed and isolated. Tianita, the man who had once seemed so distant and impenetrable, had shown her small gestures of kindness, a warm blanket left by the fire, a gentle nod when she completed a task, a quiet presence that reassured her without demanding anything in return. Still, Eliza carried a secret that pressed on her chest like a stone, a secret that no kindness could dissolve, no gentle patience could erase. She could not give Tianita children. It was a truth she had buried deep within herself, fearing the disappointment, anger, or rejection it would bring. She had lived her life in the shadows of other women's expectations, and now she feared the man she was meant to marry would see her as incomplete, unworthy, or less than. The fire crackled in the hearth that evening, casting dancing shadows across the room. Tianita sat across from her as usual, his long legs stretched toward the glow, hands resting lightly on his knees. He was silent, letting the quiet fill the space between them, giving her time to gather the courage she had been avoiding for days. Eliza? His voice was soft, careful, inviting without pressuring. She looked down at her hands, folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white. I need to tell you something, she murmured, her voice barely carrying above the fire's crackle. Tianita leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes fixed on hers. You may tell me anything, he said. I will listen. Her throat tightened and she swallowed hard. The words refused to leave her lips at first. She had rehearsed them countless times in her mind, but now, face to face with him, they felt fragile and vulnerable. She drew in a shaky breath. I can't give you children, she whispered. The confession fell into the room like a stone into still water, sending ripples through the quiet air. For a moment, there was nothing. Eliza's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he must hear it. Her hands trembled in her lap. She searched his face, expecting the flash of disappointment, the tightening of his jaw, the coldness she had feared. But instead, Tianita's expression softened. He did not flinch, he did not recoil, and he did not judge. He reached out slowly, placing his strong hand over hers. His fingers were warm, steady, grounding her in a way no words could. Then, he said quietly, his voice steady, deliberate, I will just love you more. The words struck her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She blinked, unable to speak, tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. Love more? The thought was foreign, unimaginable. She had feared rejection, scorn, or pity. Yet here was a man telling her that her inability to bear children did not lessen her worth in his eyes. It increased it. I don't understand, she admitted, her voice trembling. You are not less because of what you cannot give, he replied. You are everything to me just as you are. We will find other ways to make our life full. We will create family. We will share laughter and stories and protection. The bond between us is not measured in children alone. Eliza's breath hitched. She had never imagined such acceptance, such unwavering devotion. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as a duty, a tool, or a responsibility, but as a person worthy of love, wholly and completely. Her tears finally spilled, rolling down her cheeks as she leaned forward, resting her head against his chest. Tianita's arms wrapped around her, strong and protective, holding her as if her fragile heart were the most precious thing in the world. In that quiet, shadowed room, Eliza Harper understood something profound. Love did not demand perfection, nor did it hinge on what one could or could not give. True love, she realized, was measured in devotion, in patience, in the unwavering promise to stand by someone no matter the circumstances. And in that promise she found hope, courage, and a spark of something she had never thought possible. Joy. The morning sun filtered through the tall pines, casting long golden beams across the settlement. Eliza Harper had grown accustomed to the rhythm of life among the Apache in the few weeks since her marriage. Yet today a tension lingered in the air that no amount of chores or morning tasks could erase. Whispers had begun to travel through the tribe like wildfire, small murmurs that she could not ignore. They say the warrior has chosen poorly, one elder remarked under his breath as she passed, his eyes flicking toward her with faint suspicion. They say she cannot bear children, another added, the words sharp and cutting even though they were spoken quietly. Eliza's stomach tightened. She had confessed her secret to Tianita, yes, but the thought of others knowing, judging, and doubting her filled her with unease. The Apache had accepted her in small ways, but she knew that traditions ran deep. A woman's worth in the tribe was often measured by her ability to give life, to continue the bloodline. Without that, how could she truly belong? Tianita, however, remained unshaken. When she voiced her fears, he placed his hand over hers and looked her squarely in the eye. Their whispers cannot touch the bond between us, he said. I will defend you always. Do not fear what others think. Only what we know is true matters. Yet even with his words, Eliza could not quiet the gnawing doubt. She could hear the murmurs during meals, the subtle sideways glances when she passed in the clearing, the faint shaking of heads in private conversations. She felt the weight of history pressing down on her, traditions centuries old that told her she was inadequate. The first real test came during the tribe's morning council. Tianita had been summoned to speak with the elders, and she knew she was expected to stay outside, invisible and silent. But the whispers had followed her there, and her presence could not be ignored. As Tianita addressed the council, speaking with the calm authority of a warrior who had long been respected, one elder finally spoke aloud. His voice was steady but laced with concern. Tianita, he said, you have chosen a woman who cannot bear your children. Are you certain this union will honor our ways? Eliza's heart sank. She could see the tension in Tianita's shoulders, the flicker of patience that masked a deeper storm. Then slowly he turned to her, and the faintest smile touched his lips. He raised his voice steady and unwavering, carrying over the murmurs of doubt. I have chosen her because she is strong, because she is brave, because she is my wife. The worth of a person is not measured by the children they can bear, but by the loyalty, courage, and love they give. I will not abandon her. She is mine and she has my heart. There was a pause, a collective intake of breath. Some elders looked skeptical, others astonished. Tayanita's words, delivered with conviction and sincerity, carried weight. The council murmured among themselves, the decision not unanimous but undeniably challenged. Eliza felt a flush of warmth rise to her cheeks, not from praise but from relief. For the first time she realized that love and respect could confront tradition, that courage and devotion could outweigh centuries of expectation. She stepped closer to Tayanita, letting him take her hand once more, feeling the strength in his grip. The murmurs did not disappear entirely, but she no longer feared them. She understood that belonging did not always mean total acceptance by every voice in the tribe. It meant finding someone who saw her worth, who would defend her in the face of doubt. And she had found that in Tayanita. That evening, as they sat together by the fire, Tayanita whispered again, "See? You are more than what they think. You are mine. That is enough." Eliza leaned against him, heart finally steady, and allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a life where love could defy expectation, where her worth was not defined by tradition, but by the depth of the bond she shared with a man who would not let her go. For the first time, she felt that even the whispers of doubt could not pierce the fortress of their growing love. The morning sun rose over the rolling hills, painting the landscape in gold and amber. Eliza Harper stepped cautiously outside the cabin, her hands trembling slightly as she surveyed the world around her. For the first time since her arrival, she felt a spark of curiosity that rivaled the fear she had carried for so long. Today, Tayanita would teach her something new, something that belonged to his world, a world she had yet to understand. "Come," he said simply, his voice calm and patient. He stood near the stable, holding a coiled rope, the sunlight glinting off his dark hair. "We will start with the basics." Eliza swallowed and followed, her mind racing. The Apache way of life had always seemed distant, untouchable, almost mythical. Yet here she was, walking beside him, realizing that he intended for her not to be a passive observer but an active participant. Their first lesson was in the care of horses. Tayanita showed her how to approach the animals gently, how to read their moods, and how to gain their trust. At first, Eliza's movements were awkward, her fingers fumbling with reins and halters. She feared she would fail, that she would appear clumsy in front of him. But Tayanita's voice was steady, never harsh, correcting her with quiet instruction rather than criticism. "Feel their rhythm," he said. "Listen to their breathing. Speak softly. Always respect them." Hours passed in the sun-drenched corral, and gradually Eliza felt a strange satisfaction. The horses, once intimidating, began to respond to her touch. She laughed, a light, genuine sound she hadn't heard from herself in months. When a young colt nudged her hand with its nose, Tayanita's eyes crinkled at the corners, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You are learning," he said simply. "Good, you have courage. Courage." The word made her chest swell. It was not about bravery in battle or heroics. It was about showing up, facing fear and trying despite it. She had never thought of herself as courageous, yet here she was, slowly mastering skills she had assumed would always be beyond her reach. Next, Tayanita led her to the clearing for hunting practice. He handed her a bow, its wood smooth and worn from years of use. Her fingers trembled around the grip as she drew the string, her first arrow wobbly and awkward. He stepped beside her, guiding her posture, adjusting her aim. "Steady your breath," he whispered. "Trust yourself." The arrow flew, striking the target with a satisfying thud. Eliza gasped, astonished, and then laughed again, her heart light for the first time in weeks. Tayanita's pride was quiet but unmistakable. He had not forced her, had not demanded perfection, he had only guided her, trusted her to learn in her own time. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with fiery oranges and purples, they sat together by the riverbank, their feet dangling in the cool water. Eliza felt a rare peace settle over her. She realized that these lessons were about more than survival. They were about connection, understanding, and mutual respect. Tayanita glanced at her, a question in his dark eyes. "Do you understand now?" Eliza nodded, her fingers brushing the water. "I think I'm beginning to," she admitted. "You're patient even when I'm clumsy or afraid. You teach me instead of scolding me. You trust me." His smile widened, though still faint. "That is the beginning." We learn from each other. I learn from you as you learn from me. This is how we build strength, together. Eliza leaned slightly against him, feeling the warmth of his shoulder, the steady beat of his heart. It was a comfort unlike anything she had known. In the quiet, flowing river and the gentle rustle of leaves, she began to understand the life she had been thrust into. It was not only survival, it was a life of connection, of shared experience, of love slowly but surely growing between them. For the first time, Eliza Harper realized that she was not merely surviving. She was beginning to belong in a place she had once feared, with a man who had shown her that trust and patience could turn terror into hope, and fear into love. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and smoke from distant campfires. Eliza Harper had begun to feel a fragile confidence in her new life, her hands calloused from caring for horses and her muscles accustomed to the work of the Apache way. Yet that morning an unease settled over the settlement, sharp and instinctive. She noticed Tyanita's posture shift, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. "They are coming," he murmured, almost to himself. Eliza's stomach clenched. Though she had learned some of the skills of survival, she had yet to face the harsh realities of the frontier: lawless outlaws, revenge-minded settlers, and the constant threat of violence. She looked to Tyanita, searching his face for reassurance, and found only calm determination. The outlaws arrived before noon, a ragged band of men with guns and malice in their eyes. They demanded supplies, horses, and the obedience of anyone who dared cross their path. The settlement's defenders, a handful of Apache warriors and settlers, prepared to resist. Tyanita's voice rang out, commanding and steady, giving orders with precision and authority. "Eliza, stay close to me," he said, taking her hand. His grip was firm, grounding her as fear rose in her chest. "Do not wander. Watch and learn, but be safe." The battle that followed was chaotic, the sharp crack of rifles echoing through the trees. Tyanita moved with fluid precision, protecting the weaker, guiding the young warriors, and always keeping an eye on her. Yet when the outlaws charged near the cabin, Eliza found herself face to face with a young man wielding a knife, his intent clear in his cruel eyes. Her first instinct was to flee, but something inside her refused. She remembered Tyanita's teachings, the lessons in courage and patience in using her body and mind to survive. She grabbed a heavy stick from the ground and swung it instinctively, striking the man and forcing him back. Heart racing, she realized that her fear could be channeled into action. Tyanita arrived at her side in an instant, sweeping her behind him as he deflected another attack. "You did well," he said, his voice calm even amidst the chaos. "You are brave." Eliza's cheeks burned, not from shame but from the exhilaration of acting, of surviving, of contributing. The adrenaline coursing through her veins mingled with a strange pride. She was no longer entirely helpless. She had learned, even if imperfectly, how to defend herself. By sunset, the outlaws were defeated or driven away, retreating into the wilderness. The settlement had sustained only minor losses, thanks in no small part to Tyanita's strategy and the courage of those he had guided, including Eliza. As the dust settled, she found herself sitting beside him by the fire, both of them weary and bloodied, yet alive. Tyanita's hand found hers again, warm and reassuring. "You see?" he said softly. "Even in danger we survive. We endure. Together." Eliza leaned against him, letting the tension drain from her body. For the first time, she truly felt like a part of this life, not merely a bystander, but a participant. The outlaws had tested her fear, her courage, and her trust in Tyanita, and she had not failed. "I was so afraid," she admitted quietly. "I thought I would only slow you down, put you in danger." "You are no burden," he replied, tilting his head to look at her. "You are my wife. Your courage is as important as any warrior's skill, and today, you proved it." The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the night sky, and Eliza realized that she had crossed an invisible threshold. The fear that had once defined her life had not disappeared, but it had been tempered by experience and the unwavering presence of Tyanita. Together they had faced the violence of the outside world, and together they had endured. That night, as she lay in his arms, her body exhausted but her heart full, Eliza understood something essential. Love was not only tenderness and patience, it was shared struggle, protection, and the knowledge that, in the face of danger, they would always stand together. And in that knowledge, She felt the roots of trust and devotion grow deeper than ever before. The fire in the small cabin crackled softly, filling the quiet evening with warmth and golden light. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying the faint scent of the river and the cool promise of nightfall. Eliza Harper sat across from Tianita, her hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the flames dancing in the hearth. Though the day's skirmish with the outlaws had passed, the adrenaline lingering in her veins had left her restless. Tianita watched her quietly, sensing the storm of emotions beneath her composed exterior. He had fought alongside her, seen her courage, and yet he knew that bravery in battle did not erase fear in the heart. Slowly, he moved closer, sitting beside her, letting the warmth of his presence settle over her like a protective cloak. "Eliza," he said softly, "you are quiet tonight. What do you feel?" She swallowed, unsure of how to put the whirlwind of thoughts into words. Her mind darted between gratitude, fear, exhilaration, and confusion. She had faced danger, learned to trust her instincts, and yet she felt something more, something she had not anticipated, something far more vulnerable than fear or courage. I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've never felt like this before. Alive, yes, but connected, seen, protected. And yet—" Her hands trembled, unconsciously brushing against his as they rested in her lap. He tilted his head, his dark eyes softening. "Yet?" Her breath hitched. How could she explain the unnameable thing that had begun to bloom inside her? The realization that she was no longer just surviving but existing alongside someone who valued her, who saw her as more than her limitations, her fears, or her inability to bear children. The words faltered on her lips, fragile as glass. "I feel safe," she whispered finally. "And wanted. Not for duty, not for obligation, but for me." Tianita reached out gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You are more than enough, Eliza. Always. I did not marry you because of what you can give me, but because of who you are. Your courage, your heart. They are mine." Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time in her life, Eliza allowed herself to be vulnerable without fear of judgment. Slowly, almost tentatively, she leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. The steady beat of his heart beneath her ear was a rhythm she had never known but somehow recognized as home. "I've been so afraid," she murmured. "Afraid of failing, of being worthless. Afraid that everyone would see me as incomplete." Tianita's hand traced gentle circles along her back. "The world may whisper such things, but I do not. I will not. You are complete, Eliza. Whole. Perfect in ways that matter. And I will love you in every way I can, every day, for the rest of our lives." Her breath caught at his words. Love, real, patient, unwavering love, was not something she had expected to find in the midst of a forced marriage, in a world defined by survival and tradition. Yet here it was, blossoming quietly, steadily, against all expectation. She raised her eyes to his, seeing the sincerity reflected there, and felt the fragile thread of fear break, replaced by trust. They remained by the fire long into the night, sharing stories of childhoods, fears, and dreams, their voices soft and intimate. Every word, every glance, every touch deepened the bond between them. The physical closeness was gentle, exploratory, a dance of comfort and consent rather than desire alone. Eliza realized that intimacy was not merely in the body, but in the heart, shared vulnerability, mutual respect, and the knowledge that no matter what came, they would face it together. As the fire burned low, Tianita held her close, whispering, "You are mine, Eliza, in every way that matters, and I am yours." And for the first time in her life, Eliza Harper believed it. Not because she was forced, not because tradition dictated it, but because love, patient, quiet, and steadfast, had found its way into the corners of her heart she had long thought untouchable. In that night, in that gentle intimacy beside the fire, she understood. Love was not about what they could or could not have, but about the trust, devotion, and connection they nurtured each day. And in that understanding, she felt a peace she had never known, a certainty that she would face the future with Tayanita, together unbroken and whole. The sun hung low over the settlement, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. Eliza Harper had grown accustomed to life among the Apache, to the rhythm of the tribe and the quiet strength of Tayanita at her side. Yet a new tension rippled through the air that she could not ignore. Whispers of challenge had begun to circulate among the younger warriors, stirred by a rival named Chaitin, who resented Tayanita's leadership and, more specifically, his choice of a wife who could not bear children. Eliza sensed the undercurrent of anger before she saw it. The other warriors' glances lingered on her longer than necessary, their murmurs sharp with disdain. She knew that this confrontation was coming. It had been inevitable, but her heart still clenched at the thought of Tayanita facing it alone. That afternoon, the rival warrior made his move. He approached Tayanita in the clearing, his face a mask of arrogance. "You have chosen poorly, Chief," Chaitin sneered. "A woman who cannot give you heirs is no woman at all. Are you willing to let tradition fall for your own weakness?" Tayanita's eyes narrowed slightly, but his posture remained calm, unshaken. "My choice is not weak," he replied evenly, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had led the tribe through countless trials. "It is mine. Eliza Harper is my wife, and I will not let her honor be questioned by anyone." The other warriors gathered around, murmuring and shifting uneasily. Tayanita stepped closer to Eliza, placing a protective hand lightly on her shoulder. "She is more than her ability to bear children," he said, his tone firm, unwavering. "She is brave. She is loyal. She has stood by my side in danger and proven her courage. That is worth more than any bloodline." Eliza's breath hitched. She had feared this confrontation, feared that her inability to fulfill tradition would somehow diminish her worth in the eyes of the tribe. But now, seeing Tayanita defend her, seeing the fierce pride in his eyes, she felt a surge of gratitude and love so strong it nearly brought her to her knees. Chaitin's lips twisted in contempt. "Words are easy," he said, drawing a knife and stepping closer. "Actions will prove your claim." Tayanita's response was immediate, calm, and controlled. He positioned himself between Eliza and the rival, his hand resting on the hilt of his knife. "No one threatens my wife," he said, eyes blazing. "You will not harm her to prove your point." The standoff was tense, every movement charged with potential violence. Eliza's pulse raced, yet she did not flinch. Something inside her had shifted in the past weeks. She had learned courage, patience, and the ability to act when necessary. Stepping forward slightly, she raised her chin. "You will not speak to him that way," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. "He chose me, and he stands for me. That is all that matters." The crowd fell silent. For the first time, some of the younger warriors glanced at her differently, recognizing the strength and resolve in her words. Tayanita's jaw relaxed slightly, acknowledging the bravery she had shown. Together they stood as a united front, their bond evident to all who watched. Chaitin's face darkened with frustration, but he lowered his knife and stepped back, realizing that the loyalty between Tayanita and Eliza was unshakable. The rivals. Challenge had failed, not through brute force alone, but through trust, courage, and the unwavering bond they shared. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Tayanita guided Eliza to the cabin, his hand resting lightly on her back. "You were brave today," he said quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Your courage strengthens me, and the tribe will see it as well. We are stronger together than any tradition or rival could ever break." Eliza leaned into him, the warmth of his presence comforting and steady. She realized that this test had done more than challenge Tayanita's leadership. It had proven the depth of their connection, the loyalty that bound them not only to each other but to the life they were building. That night, as they sat by the fire, hands intertwined, Eliza whispered, "I never thought I could feel so strong, so valued." Tayanita smiled softly, pressing his forehead to hers. "You are more than you know, Eliza, and I will spend every day showing you just how loved you are." In that quiet, firelit room, Eliza Harper understood that love, true love, was a force stronger than tradition, fear, or doubt. And with Tianita by her side, she knew they could face anything, together. The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Eliza Harper awoke to the quiet rustle of the settlement stirring. Her heart felt heavier than usual, a knot of worry and anticipation twisting in her chest. Today, a messenger from her settler family was arriving, a reminder of the life she had once known, a life that now seemed distant and impossible to reclaim. Eliza dressed slowly, each movement weighed with thought. Tianita had gone out early, attending to the horses and the needs of the tribe, unaware that today would demand a decision she could no longer postpone. She felt torn between two worlds, one filled with familiar faces, comfort and obligation, and the other a new, uncertain life built on love, courage, and the bond she had forged with a man who had come to mean everything to her. The messenger arrived mid-morning, a stern-faced man bearing a letter sealed with wax. His eyes flicked toward the cabin and then back to Eliza, reading her tension. "Your family requests your presence," he said simply. "They insist you return home to live under their care." Eliza's stomach churned. The words reminded her of the days she had spent in fear, the endless nights of duty and expectation, the suffocating life she had fled, even if only by circumstance. And yet, there was a part of her that hesitated, uncertain if leaving would mean abandoning the love and trust she had found. Tianita returned then, his presence calm yet commanding. He sensed the messenger before he spoke, his eyes narrowing slightly in quiet understanding. He approached Eliza and took her hand, holding it lightly but firmly. "Do you wish to go?" he asked, his voice steady, devoid of pressure. Eliza looked into his eyes, searching for answers she already felt deep in her heart. I do not know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to go back to the life I once knew. But another part of me," she paused, words faltering. "Another part of me cannot leave you or this life. It feels alive, real, and I am not afraid with you." Tianita nodded, understanding her conflict. "Fear is not the measure of life, Eliza," he said softly. "Courage is, love is. You have already chosen in your actions, in your heart. You belong here with me if you truly wish it." The messenger waited impatiently, but Eliza turned to him, her gaze firm. "I cannot return," she said clearly. "My place is here. I have found a family, a life, and a love that I cannot abandon. Please tell my family that I am safe and that I am happy. That is all they need to know." The messenger's eyes widened in surprise, but he nodded, delivering her words as if carrying sacred instructions. He left quickly. The weight of expectation lifted from Eliza's shoulders. She exhaled, the first real breath of freedom she had taken in weeks. Tianita's hand tightened around hers and he pulled her close. "You have made a brave choice," he said, pressing his lips to her forehead. "Not for me, but for yourself. That is the courage that defines you." Eliza rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to choose a life fully, not out of fear, duty, or obligation, but because it was right for her soul. She had faced doubt, danger, and the pull of the past, and yet she had chosen love, trust, and belonging. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the hills and the trees of the settlement, Eliza walked beside Tianita, hand in hand, feeling a profound sense of peace. She had chosen a life defined not by expectation, but by connection, courage, and devotion. Her past no longer held her captive. The future was theirs to shape together. Sitting by the river later that afternoon, Tianita looked at her with a quiet smile. "You are mine, Eliza, not because of duty but because of choice. That is the greatest gift you can give, and the greatest gift I will ever receive." Eliza smiled back, feeling tears of relief and joy prick her eyes. "And I will give it gladly every day," she whispered. For the first time in her life, Eliza Harper felt truly free and wholly in love. She had made her decision. She would stay, she would belong, and she would live with Tianita in a life built on trust, courage, and unwavering devotion. The seasons turned quietly over the high plains, each sunrise painting the land in colors of gold and fire. What had once been a place of uncertainty had become a home for Eliza Harper, A home shaped by patience, laughter, and love that grew deeper with each passing day. A year had passed since she had chosen to stay with Tyanita. The tribe had come to accept her not merely as the wife of their leader, but as one of their own. Her kindness, her tireless help in tending to the wounded and teaching the children to read and write, had earned her a place of quiet honor. Yet the world still whispered reminders of what she could not give, of the empty cradle by the window that would never be filled. One evening, Eliza stood by that same window, watching the light fade over the hills. A soft ache touched her heart. Not sorrow, but something gentler. Acceptance, perhaps. The ache was part of her story, and she had learned to carry it with grace. Tyanita entered quietly, his presence as steady as the land itself. He set down his bow, walked over to her, and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin lightly on her shoulder. "You're quiet again," he murmured. Eliza smiled faintly. "I was thinking," she said, "about how much has changed." "How much I have changed." He turned her gently to face him. "You have become stronger than you know," he said. "You were fire when I met you, afraid of burning. Now you have learned to warm instead of destroy." His words drew a laugh from her, soft and full of affection. "And you," she said, brushing her fingers along his cheek, "have taught me that love can be patient, that even the deepest wounds can heal when someone believes in you." They sat together by the fire, the air rich with the scent of pine and smoke. The warmth between them was not the wild, uncertain spark of their early days, but the deep, steady flame of two souls who had grown together through hardship and devotion. As the firelight flickered across Tyanita's face, Eliza thought of all they had endured, the suspicion, the battles, the choices that had tested them both. Every trial had only bound them closer. Their love was not loud or perfect, but it was enduring, real. "I used to believe that not being able to give life meant I had less to offer," she whispered, her eyes glistening in the glow. "But now I see that love itself is life, isn't it? We make our own family in the hearts we hold close." Tyanita took her hand and pressed it to his chest. "You have given me more life than I ever dreamed," he said quietly. "When I was lost, you brought me peace. When I doubted, you gave me faith. There is no child that could mean more to me than the woman who stands before me now." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they were not from sadness. They were from the fullness of a heart that had finally found its home. Outside, the night grew deep and still. The stars stretched endlessly above them, ancient witnesses to promises made and kept. Tyanita rose and stepped to the door, looking out over the vast moonlit land. "This land will remember us," he said softly. "Not through blood, but through love. Through every life you've touched, every heart you've healed." Eliza joined him, slipping her hand into his. "And I will remember you," she whispered. "Every day and every breath. You taught me that love doesn't need to be born. It only needs to be chosen." Tyanita turned to her then, his eyes reflecting both tenderness and strength. "Then I will keep choosing you," he said. "For all my days." She smiled, and in that moment, everything, the doubts, the pain, the longing fell away, replaced by the simple, unshakable truth of their love. The wind whispered softly through the pines, carrying their promise into the night. The fire burned low, the stars shimmered brighter, and in the quiet heart of the West, two souls who had once been lost found eternity in each other's arms.